down that camera and strap in. It's time for a new episode of TogChat Live. It's an open mic night for photographers. Get ready for 60 minutes of your photography questions in real time with answers from your host, Joe Edelman.
Hey gang, happy Monday night. How are you all? Thanks for joining me for another live episode of TogChat. I'm Joe Edelman, and our discussion tonight, will that new camera make you a better photographer? Okay, so strap in. If you got here early, you know people already have a lot of really hardcore opinions about this. So follow along. I think that you will be not entirely surprised by what I'm going to recommend, but I'm also hoping that you might learn a couple things along the way. So stay tuned, okay? At the end, I'm going to give you 6 important questions that you should answer before you upgrade your camera. And I promise, of course, to do at least 30 minutes of live Q&A to answer your questions. So, our topic. Let's start with more megapixels. How about faster shooting speeds? Greater dynamic range? It's all cool. It all costs more money. In fact, lots more money, right? 2017 has been an exciting year in the world of photography, especially when it comes to the cameras that we use. Sony released the A9 with its full-frame 24.2 megapixel sensor and the ability to shoot 20 frames per second, not to mention 5-axis image stabilization that is the equivalent of 5 stops of slower shutter speed. You can have all of this amazingness for a mere $4,500 just for the body. Now, not to be outdone, Nikon released the D850 with its 45.7 megapixel full frame sensor and 9 frames per second shooting speed. Also, the ability to shoot 8K time-lapse movies and the lowest base ISO of any DSLR or mirrorless camera that is currently on the market. You too can be an owner of a D850 for just $3,300. And of course, if you want the full 9 frame per second capability, just add another $1,000 to that price tag. Now, I have to be honest with you, all of these super specs just give me a super headache. And the price tags? That's some serious heartburn. So let's take a step back for just a moment. Remember Steve Jobs? You know, the man who revolutionized cell phones and began an era of consumer fanboys who would rapidly purchase the latest and greatest, regardless of the cost and the features. I would argue that Steve Jobs also changed the world of photography, not because he included cameras in the phones, but because he tapped in to an age-old concept and brought it in to the digital world. That concept? Boys love toys. So what did he do? He gave us cooler, sexier, better toys. Now, camera manufacturers didn't ignore this. In fact, they paid a lot of attention to this, and they learned from Steve Jobs. Sony was the first to capitalize on this phenomenon. Now, don't get me wrong. Canon, Nikon shooters, they've been debating which brand is better for decades. But Sony, with some truly great new gear, bolstered by social media and a few well-timed YouTube videos, they have created a fan culture around their cameras, and they did it at a time where there were only a few lenses available and even fewer accessories. Heck, still to this day, Sony fanboys are so fanatical about their brand that they'll buy a $4,000 camera body and then spend $400 on an adapter to put another company's lens on it. Go figure. Now, let's be clear. I have mad respect for Sony gear. I was a Sony shooter. Yeah, seriously. I was an early adopter Sony shooter, and I shot exclusively Sony gear for just over a year. This was back when it wasn't even cool to be a Sony shooter. My last Sony was the A7R, and believe me, I loved the camera and I love the EVF feature. In fact, I really, really miss it using my Nikons. But the fact is, I've been a Nikon shooter for my entire professional career, with the exception of that 1 year. And if anything, my experience with Sony, it actually further solidified my commitment to Nikon. But hey, that's a subject for another video. So what I want to talk to you about tonight is how important it is to buy the latest, newest, greatest piece of gear right when it comes out, or even within a few months of its release. Do you really need to upgrade your camera? That's the big question. So how do you know when it's time? If you're already a Sony or a Nikon fanboy and you have your A9 or your D850, just relax for a few minutes and breathe, okay? It's the young and it's the new photographers that I really want to talk about tonight, or talk to tonight. So hopefully you guys have learned the concept that the camera doesn't make the photo. The photographer makes the photo. Now, of course, many people choose to ignore that, but it's true. I mean, photographers all over the world are making incredible images with smartphones every day. So it's not about the camera. Now, in my case, full disclosure, I own and I use 4 different camera models for still photography. My primary go-to camera is the Nikon D810. 36.3 megapixels of sweet dynamic range and perfect for portraiture and beauty, which is what I shoot. I also recently purchased a Nikon D500. Now this is an APS-C camera with 21 megapixels of awesome speed and great low light capability. I bought the D500 so that I could compare full frame and APS-C images for my YouTube channel, or for my YouTube videos for you guys. And I have to tell you, I have been very, very impressed by the D500, and I've even been shooting beauty shots with it that really are kind of blowing my mind. Third on my list, I have a Panasonic Lumix GH5. I purchased this camera originally for video, and I do use it for video. If you're watching this broadcast, you are viewing me on an image that's being shot with a Panasonic GH4. The GH5, though, has proven itself to be an amazing camera, not just for video, but for stills. And I find myself shooting stills with that camera almost as much as I do video. Now, for those of you that aren't aware, it's a micro 4/3 sensor, meaning it's tiny. And believe me, this sensor stands up to the big boys really, really well. Last but not least on my camera list, I shoot with an iPhone 7 Plus. If you have any doubts about what that camera can do, check out the Instagram profile that I set up for my iPhone photos. The link, it's in the description below the video. Now, certainly, you don't need 4 cameras, and I'm not suggesting that. I can confidently say that I have a need and a purpose for each of mine, and I would suggest the same for you. Now, in the last few weeks, I've been asked over and over and over again if I'm going to buy the new Nikon D850 when it comes out. Well, it's out, and I haven't bought one, and I probably won't buy one. At least, definitely not in 2017. And honestly, I see no reason that I will need to purchase one next year. Certainly that could change, but at the moment, I don't see that happening. So this is where people look at me like I'm strange. And it's like, well, why would you not buy the D850? It's an amazing camera. So look, there are several questions that need to be considered before you make the jump to a new and more expensive camera. And honestly, these are kind of common sense type questions. So let's dig in. Question number 1. Is there anything wrong with your current camera? Is it holding you back because it lacks features that you need? I mean, not in the sense of having gear acquisition syndrome. I mean, as in, like, are there techniques that you want to do, but your camera doesn't support them? For me, at this point in my career, the Nikon D810 totally meets all my needs. Question number 2. Will this camera make my photography better? The title of our TogChat tonight. In the case of the D850, no. Going from 36.3 megapixels with the D810 to 45.7 megapixels with the D850, that sounds like a lot. But if your images aren't being displayed on the side of a building in Times Square, that is not a difference that is going to be noticed. And indeed, the D850 has even more dynamic range than the D810, but not enough for me to spend that kind of money, especially since just 2 months ago, before the D850 was announced, I felt that the dynamic range of the D810 was awesome and better than any camera I had ever used. I still feel that way today. The D810 was and is meeting my needs as a photographer. Question number 3, and this is an important one for a lot of you because a lot of you are trying to or want to make money with your camera. Will this new camera make me more money? Since I do this professionally and I pay my bills with the camera, is it going to impact my bottom line in a positive way? In the case of the D850, it's a very simple answer. No, it's not. And that's nothing against the camera. Question number 4. Does the new camera have features that will save me time? My business is not your typical 9 to 5, punch the clock and then forget about it business. Now look, I'm not complaining. I love what I do, but I am always on the lookout for ways to streamline my workflow. I was really excited about the initial rumor that the D850 would have an EVF, electronic viewfinder. Now, for those of you that don't know what that is, most DSLR cameras, other than Sony, have OVF or optical viewfinders. So when you look through the lens, you're viewing the scene at your lens's widest aperture. And when you press the shutter, the aperture contracts to give you the appropriate f-stop. With an EVF, you are looking into the viewfinder at a high-resolution LCD screen. And what you're seeing is a finished image with the actual exposure, the actual depth of field, everything. I personally love that feature. The Sony cameras are the first to get it out there and use it at a professional level, and it's outstanding. Now, believe me, I have no doubt that Nikon and Canon will adopt this feature eventually. But it is not a feature that will make my photography better. It's a feature that will make my life easier, okay? So, I have to remember that purchasing a new camera is also going to require a time investment. And this is something that people overlook frequently. It's going to require a time investment to read the manual and familiarize myself with the camera. When I'm working with a camera, I need to focus my attention on my subject, not the camera. So it's imperative that I get to know the camera inside and out and practice with it. This takes time. Camera manufacturers sometimes make this really difficult. I mentioned my recent purchase of the Nikon D850. Great little camera. But for whatever brilliant reason, Nikon changed the arrangement of the buttons on the D850 so that it's laid out completely different than the D810 and a lot of the other Nikons. That is simply annoying, but not something that I can use as an excuse when I'm shooting. So I have to familiarize myself with the camera and practice with the camera. Question number 5. Does the new camera have features that allow me to do things that I can't currently do? So this is a little bit like what I mentioned earlier, but to give you an example, for me, I'm an old school shooter and I believe in learning good technique. Nothing replaces good technique. No technology will ever replace good technique for being able to generate consistently great images. So if there is value for being able to fire off 20 frames a second, if you're a photojournalist or maybe a wedding photographer, as long as you realize that you are not going to get consistently good results that way, remember, spray and pray is not a photographic technique. It's a Hail Mary. Okay? So as long as there's value, then that's a potential reason to make an upgrade. And question number 6, and this is a big one. If I do decide to upgrade my camera, if it is a new camera like the A9 when it was released, or the Nikon D850 when it was released, should I buy it on pre-order? Should I pick it up as soon as it's released in the stores? My answer, definitely not. The A9 and the D850 are perfect examples of new cameras with new technology in them. In fact, a lot of the early A9 adopters had overheating issues, which Sony has resolved through firmware. So far, it would seem that the D850 owners are in the clear and the camera's working as advertised, but let's face it, is 30 days really going to have a negative impact on your photography or your business? Sit tight. Wait to see if problems are found with the camera. And then better yet, rent one when they first come out and actually use it. You know, it boggles my mind how many people will buy cameras or lenses or any kind of gear because they watch some guy drool all over it on YouTube. Most people won't buy clothes or shoes without trying them on. Would you purchase a new car without test driving it? These are all things that we consider carefully and test before we buy so that we don't have to think about them when we use them. Yet most photographers will buy a camera sight unseen because somebody else said it's amazing, or because somebody said that it's the best thing ever, or simply because they just love their brand that much. Now, look, you may think that I am making the camera companies sound like the bad guys here. I promise you that is not my intent. We need Sony. We need Canon. We need Nikon. And heck, we even need Pentax. And we need them to make money so that they stay in business. But what's happening here is that in order for these companies to make money, they make a lot of camera equipment that most people don't need. And through really excellent use of social media and YouTube, they are creating a fanboy culture around their gear that is shifting the focus of photography. So what we have are more and more geartographers and fewer photographers. Now look, I'm not talking trash about the geartographers either. I said earlier, boys love their toys, so that it's a given that there will always be a group of photographers who get more satisfaction from the gear that they own than the quality of their images. And honestly, that's okay. But most people purchase their first camera not so that they can have the coolest toys, but so that they can take nice photos. The downside to the dramatic increase in this fanboy culture and all of the geartographers that it's creating, we're encouraging the equipment companies to rush new technology to market and drive the prices higher and higher and higher. So I encourage you, for you, resist the peer pressure. Don't follow the crowd. Really learn photography instead of learning about every feature of every camera and why yours is better than the next guy's. Instead, use your time to practice and then practice some more. Develop the skills so that you can become known for the images that you produce instead of for the camera that you use. And listen, when you are considering new gear, be a smart consumer. Try it out. Test it. Hold it. Touch it. Heck, even go ahead and drool on it since it belongs to somebody else. That way, if you buy it, you'll really know what you're getting into and your camera won't have drool stains on it, right? And those are my Tog thoughts for the week. Thanks for listening, gang. It is good to see that we have a ton of people in here tonight, gang. Sven's here, Angel's here, Andrew, Jacques, Sergio, Anand, Casper's here, Raymond, Amanda from New Jersey, Sean, Marcos is here. Marcos, I'm hoping that you've got like the deep question for me waiting. I didn't see all the questions going by. Benjamin, Susan's here, Roy Patton. How you guys all doing? It's great to see you. So I hope that you all had a great weekend. I hope that you are all planning to do some shooting this week and get out there and use these cameras. So let's see what we've got thrown around in here for some questions. I know that there is a ton of equipment conversation that's been going on, and that's okay. But let's go ahead and load in some questions there for me, gang. I'm going to scroll back here. And, one of the things that I will say, kind of out of the corner of my eye, while you guys were giving me some questions. Out of the corner of my eyes, I was watching, you know, a lot of these gear comments go through. Obviously, you know, you can take two of the same pieces of gear. Two different photographers are going to have two very different experiences. This further, you know, fortifies my recommendation that you actually use the gear. Touch it, use it, feel it, play with it, read the manuals in advance. Hopefully you all are aware that pretty much any piece of gear that's on the market today, camera or lens, the important stuff, you can download the manuals from the manufacturer's website. So if you're actually doing your due diligence and considering purchasing a camera, you can go ahead and you can read all of that stuff well before you actually make the purchase. That's also going to help you get a sense of what's it really going to be like using, you know, this camera. So, all right, so let's see here. I'm looking for questions. And then, of course, it's all equipment stuff. Amanda, you also want to know what brand lenses you guys recommend. Amanda, that's like the worst question ever. You know, so I'm going to ignore everybody's responses to you, and here's why, Amanda. All you're getting is a bunch of hot air, and I mean no disrespect to anybody that answered Amanda. If you want to get into photography and you want to build out a kit, Amanda, and if you want to take great pictures, you can't ask somebody else what you should buy. And taking the unofficial poll on YouTube, well, 15 people said Nikon, but 30 said Sony, and there were only 6 Canon. What does that tell you? That just tells you the bunch of people that tuned into a live stream on YouTube what they use. You need to go out. You need to do your research. So honestly, this is not really the best platform to do that. Walk into a camera store. I did a talk chat a couple weeks ago about why it's important to still visit small town, local camera stores, because you can talk to people that really actually give a damn about you and your photography, and they're going to be there the next time you go back, and the time after that, and the time after that. So that's really how you want to do that research. Okay. So Benjamin Sutton, the guy who sends his gear in because he thinks his less than ideal images or equipment problems. Hey, you got to blame it on somebody, man. Come on, like, go easy on that guy. Maybe he's onto something. A lot of us could try that, right? So let's see here. I know there were some questions way in the back. So you know what, guys? If you had a question early on, do me a favor, because I realize there's tons of gear comments in here. If you had a question early on, go ahead and load it back in here for me so that I don't have to scroll all the way back and try and find it. So Casper, you were planning on buying a macro lens. Then you tried your cheap handy 50 and achieved what you thought only a macro could achieve. Now I really debate if I needed it. I worked it out, trial and error. Well, yeah, I mean, Casper, there's a couple ways you can do macro with a 50 millimeter. So realistically, what you wind up with is a scenario where the macro lens is a convenience feature. So I would say to anybody, if you're going to do a lot of macro work, yes, then invest in a macro lens. If you are just going to do it occasionally, just to kind of dabble, well, then, you know, unless you've got money to throw away, I wouldn't purchase a macro lens. So on a 50 millimeter, you can do two things that come to mind. One, you can purchase close-up filters, which back in the day, I used to use them. They're still available. It's basically like a +1, a +2, and a +3. And you basically screw them on in any combination, and it allows you to do almost everything a macro lens does. The other that you can do, depending on what you are trying to shoot macro-wise, and this can be kind of fun, take your 50 millimeter off your camera, flip it around, hold it tight up against the front of the camera. You now have a macro lens. So, of course, you have to use your finger then to adjust the aperture, the little pin that's there, but you can have a lot of fun with that, okay? Now, if you have a lens that's all electronic and doesn't have a pin, that won't work unless you shoot your macro wide open, okay? But it totally works. And Nick, yes, if you want to spend the money, but then we come back to money, you can actually buy a reversing ring that has your camera brand mount on the ring, and then you thread the lens in via the filter threads on the front. So all of those scenarios, though, are going to be cheaper than purchasing a macro lens. So again, it really depends on how much use do you have for it, okay? Let's see, Robert Julian, why do some stores' websites publish a 35 millimeter equivalent for a DX lens? You know, Robert, that's something that has started in the early days of the digital work, because a lot of the cameras initially were APS-C sensors, which means they weren't full frame 35 millimeter sensors, and people were coming over from film. So they did it to give people a sense of this is kind of the equivalent that you're going to get. And it's a crop factor, okay? And it's basically just, it's stuck. So, you know, they still do it. It hasn't changed since. Most people, if they stick with photography, and I say most, I don't mean that it's a rule. It's definitely not something that I'm going to tell you, you have to plan on doing. But what happens is most people, as they progress, if they stick with this long enough, they want to get up to the full sensors because they reach a point where they feel that APS-C is holding them back. And believe me, it doesn't, but I'm just telling you what most people do. So that also means that down the road, you're going to wind up dealing with the 35 millimeter format again. So they give you that information kind of as a comparison, so to speak, okay? Rafe, I'm a wedding photographer and I'm looking for a great portrait lens. What should I buy? 85 1.8 Nikon or a Tokino 100 millimeter f2.8? They are both awesome lenses, Rafe. Really, the way you have to look at it is, number one, if you're one of those people that's all about shooting at 1.8, well, then there's your answer there. If you would like a lens that's got a little bit more versatility and you would like to be able to do the macro work and you don't mind shooting at 2.8, then the Tokina, I can tell you firsthand because I own one, it's an amazing lens. You can't beat the price. It's less than $400. It's old school optics design. It's got a brass barrel inside. Outstanding lens. But you're not going to go wrong with either of them. As I mentioned in the video that I have about lenses for portraits on my YouTube channel, my go-to lens is that Tokina 100mm 2.8. So, Ken Vincent, any idea when the PhotoFlex Rapidomes will be available in retail channels? They seem to be scarce so far. Yeah, Ken, apparently that's my fault. But they are out there. I'm pretty sure PhotoFlex has them in stock, which means that if you go to Amazon, you can purchase them directly from PhotoFlex on Amazon. Same price as you do, you know, at the retailers, B&H, Adorama, that kind of thing. And there's a really slight possibility. Sometimes I know ProMark Brands marketing diva sits in on these TogChats. So if she's here, maybe she'll answer for us. But if not, I am pretty sure I saw them very, very recently in stock on Amazon, which is actually the PhotoFlex store. And Casper's telling me Adorama has them in stock. So I think they're starting to, you know, be available again. So yeah, just, you know, kind of look around to a couple different places. Okay. James Lewis, thank you for the thumbs up. Going full frame, do you ever change the DX mode to get the 1.5 reach out of your lens? You know, every so often, I used to do that. Now that I have the D500, of course, I don't really have a need. But I only bought the D500 for the YouTube stuff. But I'm having a lot of fun with the camera. It's a sweet little camera. So for me, it was kind of an occasional thing, but not that often would I make that switch. Robert Bechtel, at this stage of things, what keeps you from embracing the Panasonic for studio photos since you're not a shallow depth of field boy and almost all your work is digital? That's a great question, Robert. And I'll tell you this, I haven't talked a lot about it. I'm really like getting to the point where, because of what I'm experiencing, both with this D500 and the GH5, I think I may go ahead and step over to the dark side just a little bit and actually do a video about each of those cameras. So I'll probably do the video that is the last guy to review the Nikon D500, right? Because I'm certainly not the first. But I have used the GH5 in a studio setting for shooting models, for shooting portraits. I've picked it up kind of at the end of a session, put the transmitter on it, run it. And I'll tell you what, I love the images. Love the images. I will say that I think ultimately if I was going to make a move like that, I would probably actually consider going back to Sony, only because I did like the Sony cameras. I love the way the Sony cameras are set up. Not the A9, it would be one of the A7 series. But Panasonic, I think, is kind of... Igor, thank you so much for the super chat. I'll get to your question in just a second. The Panasonic is kind of... it's like the quiet underdog in the race. You know, everybody associates Panasonic with video. And of course, then there's the bourgeois attitude of, oh, it's Micro Four Thirds. So, oh, you know, that's not good enough. people should be paying more attention to Panasonic. I'll tell you that straight up. They should be paying a hell of a lot more attention. So yeah, I mean, in that sense, anything's possible. I do believe Nikon's going to get their act together. I do believe Canon's going to get their act together with the mirrorless, the smaller cameras, all of these newer features. But sure enough, if they don't, you know, both Sony and Panasonic are really, really coming up there, and they're going to be forces to be reckoned with when it comes to shooting stills in both cases. All right, Igor, what is your export file presets? I mean, file settings and image sizing. So I've gotten to the point I actually don't use any presets, Igor, but that's not going to help you with an answer. So let me tell you what I use, and then I'll tell you what settings I would recommend. I use a program called JPEG Mini. So it's JPEG Mini. You can Google that. It is a standalone program, or it can be used as a plugin for both Photoshop and Lightroom. JPEG Mini is an amazing compression utility. So since I do, you know, probably the overwhelming majority of my work goes online, goes on the web, it's going to go on social media, etc. And for social media especially, I don't want Facebook recompressing my images. So I go with JPEG Mini because it works and it's easy and it's like one click, poof, done, there it goes, okay? The things that you want to make sure that you are paying attention to when you're exporting your images and doing all that kind of stuff. If we're talking about social media, so you didn't kind of mention what you're exporting for, but since that's what most people are exporting for, there's no reason to post an image online that's more than 1200 pixels wide, unless you're doing like one of the header images for YouTube or that kind of thing. But for your basic posts, for Instagram, all that stuff, 1200 pixels wide is more than enough. So I would set my longest dimension at 1200 pixels. 72 DPI is going to be the other setting that I'm going to look at. And then if I'm doing a JPEG, I am usually going to set my quality settings somewhere between 70 and 80 in that neck of the woods, okay? Anything over 80, you're really not gaining a lot other than file size to the image. So I hope that helps out. But I do talk about it, Igor, in my marketing series that I did. So if you go to my YouTube channel, look up the 4 marketing videos. The second video, which is Social Media for Photographers Part 2, I talk about all the export settings and I show both the Photoshop and the Lightroom versions in there. So check that out, and that'll give you a little bit more detailed, okay? Steven Stiles, I'm tossed on buying the D850. This market needs diversity to stay afloat. One-day photojournalism, next events, and better out-of-camera images will save me a lot of post-processing time. Thoughts? You know, Steven, I don't think the D850 is going to save you, you know, it's not going to save you post-processing time. In fact, it's going to add to your post-processing time because it automatically is going to slow your computer down. The file sizes are almost double the size of what the D810s are, okay? So you've got a lot more file to work with, which means if you're a detail-oriented photographer, you're going to be paying attention to a lot of that detail that you're going to want to retouch, clean up, that type of stuff. So, you know, I don't think, Igor, thank you very much. I don't know, Stephen, that I would agree with the D850 being the solution as you describe it. Again, gang, I'm not dissing Nikon, Sony, or any of these companies. I think the D850 is a sweet camera. Absolutely. And, you know, I'm a boy. I would love the toy. But I can't justify the toy. I simply can't. And so that's where you got to look at it. I mean, and you're talking photojournalism, Stephen. So let's face it, you know, you don't need 40 plus megapixels for photojournalism, even for magazine work, and even for events. What are they doing with your images for events that you need that many megapixels? So I don't really know what the point would be there. And the idea of, oh, it's got more dynamic range, so it'd be better. Well, there is this thing called proper exposure, and proper exposure has done photographers well for decades, lots of decades. So, you know, refine your technique, not a problem. So I don't think that would be the reason, you know, for you to do it. So, Mr. California Kings, do you have personal experience when you're starting out in photography that buying a certain piece of gear that you were convinced you needed but realized you didn't after buying? I had that. Actually, let me phrase that before I start. I didn't have that piece of experience when I was younger. I've had that piece of experience recently. I've talked about it briefly. I don't want to go off on a tangent tonight, okay? But I recently purchased the Flashpoint 8200 from Adorama. So, it's the Godox Evolve 600, whatever they call them. They all have different names for the same damn flash. Highly, highly, highly disappointed. It's a toy. Grossly overrated. It'll be on eBay very, very soon. I'm going to do a video about why I wouldn't buy it, and then I'm going to get rid of it. But I paid cash for it. It wasn't handed to me. I thought that I would be really interested in using them, and nah. Not at all what I expected. And it was stupidity on my part. I did not do the research that I encourage all of you to do. I'm totally going to own that. I did not do the research that I've encouraged all of you to do. My research was listening to how excited people were about it. And I wasn't the first one to rush out and buy it. So it's been out for a while. Everybody that has it goes crazy, loves it. But, I liked a few features about it. I thought that it would be really a great concept, and, not at all. So Chad Foreman, the company that makes my shirts, no longer makes these shirts, which sucks. They now make t-shirts of all things. It's a company called Roar, R-O-A-R. But yeah, so I'm looking for a new shirt supplier. Okay. Andrew Russell, would you agree that if you choose the gear that suits you, you have a better chance of developing and honing your own style? Andrew, I don't think that necessarily has anything to do with your style, but you are going to develop and hone your style if you are comfortable with your gear. So if I look at it that way, then yes, I agree with you. Okay. But otherwise, no, I don't think that in that sense, it's anything more than allowing you to be comfortable with the gear you work with. For all of these decades, aside from my 1 year with Sony, for all of these decades, even when like Nikon was not keeping up with Canon, and Canon was completely like just kicking Nikon's butt all over the place. This was back like in the middle 2000s. I stuck with Nikon when it made no sense to stick with Nikon then. The reason, true story. So this kind of fits to your question there, Andrew. And gang, this is not a diss on Canon, please. It's just an honest, this is how I feel. I don't like the way Canon cameras feel. I don't like the ergonomics, the way things are laid out. I love the ergonomics of Nikon cameras. And I love the ergonomics of Sony, by the way, to be clear. The engineers in both of these companies have done an amazing job with the way they've laid out the cameras. And I would argue Sony has done an even better job than Nikon. But I love the Nikon ergonomics, and that's why I stuck with them all that time. So that kind of fits your point a little bit in the sense that I'm just so comfortable with that. It helps me do what I do without having to think about it. It is really important to me to not have to think about the camera when it's in my hands. I need to be thinking about my subject. That is super, super important to me. And that's why I had that little complaint about the D500 in my opening, because for whatever reason, they switched all the buttons around. So everything's in different places than it is on the other cameras. It's like, why? It's basically when you pick up and hold the camera, it feels just like any other Nikon. It fits really well in your hand, but all the buttons are in a different place, which makes no sense to me. Steven, thank you so much, man, for the super chat. Really, really appreciate it, okay? Let's see. Thomas Palmer, were you ever in a situation where you need to advertise a project to local or internet medias? How do you do it? Well, it depends on kind of what project, Thomas. Give me a little bit more background. I mean, obviously, in today's world, the first place you should turn for any kind of advertising literally is social media. Unless it's something that's not appropriate to put on social media, and then we can, talk to other things. But so Robin Quinn, the people that love the 8200 love it. And if you're loving it, seriously, congratulations. I don't expect my video to change your mind. I don't expect it to make you sell yours. But for me, no go. And in the big picture of things, I would argue that the people that bought them should have looked at other equipment. So yeah, I will break it all down and explain it. I just very disappointed with it. Mortified at the weight. Stupidly heavy. There's no reason for a flash that size to be that heavy. Can't justify it. And the way the mounts are placed on it, you simply cannot use this with most speedlight equipment that's already out there. So they're basically forcing you to go out and get all new mounts, different modifiers. And if you put it in existing modifiers, it's horribly inefficient, especially if you're using the bare bulb flash, because it's basically leaving a big gap, so you're just throwing light all over the place. So already, here you've got this brand new revolutionary flash, and people have DIY solutions all over the place on how to put it in modifiers, which that makes no sense. That's just poor design on the part of the company. So, but I will dig into it in depth, okay? Let's see. I know there were some questions back here. Rarebo question: for quick and easy portable outdoor fill light, what do you prefer to use? For outdoor fill light, I mean, it would be a speed light most of the time. I do occasionally take studio strobes like the Alien B, the DV800s out and use them with a Vagabond pack. But generally, it would be a speed light. For modifiers, I used to take out soft boxes, medium-sized soft boxes, but per the video that I did just a few weeks ago, my go-to modifier outdoors on location now is the PhotoFlex Rapidome. Usually in an outdoor setting, I'm going to use it with the softbox diffuser on the front. Love that modifier. Love it, love it, love it for speed lights. It's awesome, okay? Nick Britton, will DSLRs become obsolete? I do believe they will. I don't think it's going to happen real soon, but I absolutely believe they will. The only thing, I mean, if you think about the logic, you get rid of the mirror, you're eliminating one more thing that breaks. That's great, okay? You know, there was a time when the mirrorless cameras first started coming out, there was a delay, a shutter delay. So, of course, you couldn't think of using it professionally. Sony eliminated that. Those days are gone. So, realistically, if we look at it big picture thinking, the reason why Nikon and Canon haven't jumped quickly is for them to go to mirrorless, and they will. They've admitted they're working on it. But for them to go to mirrorless, think about it. If you're a Canon or a Nikon owner, and they come out with a mirrorless system that is meant to compete with Sony, but if they tell you that you have to buy all new lenses, that none of your current lenses would work, there would be the biggest revolt ever. And if they tell you that, hey, here's this whole new series of lenses, but if you buy an adapter like you used to have to do with Sony, you can use your old lenses, there will still be a big revolt. So part of what they've got to deal with is they've got to deal with a lot of legacy. Sony had the luxury of no legacy. So they were able to take this new technology and run with it. And they did an amazing job. But yeah, we're at a point where there's really no reason to have DSLRs. There simply isn't. But Sony and Nikon also have a lot of legacy that's built into their business model and built into the way they make money. So they've got to be able to transition this. And if you think about it, that's a hell of a task. It's not like, oh, let's just come out with a DSLR, or excuse me, come out with a mirrorless line and it's all good. It's got to be a mirrorless line that's going to work with these lenses, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot that's got to be dealt with there. But I believe they'll get there. I really do. And at that point, yeah, why have a DSLR? What's the point? So, okay. Let's see. Stephen Wampler. Okay, we're talking about white balance there. Wooter, let me rephrase my question. If you have to shoot where you agree 10 photos with your customer, what would be more or less the quantity of photos they can choose from? Does more images help upsell? No, Wooter. There is a lot of psychology research that's been done by the marketing world, okay? Too many choices prevents people from making choices. So you have to experiment to find the balance point. If you want somebody to hand you the right number, it's not going to happen. You've got to do some experimenting, okay? But if the deal is you're going to give them 10, and by the way, I would question why you're giving them 10. Like, I don't know what kind of photo shoot it is. If this is a portrait session, let's say, why do they need 10 pictures? So I would suggest that you're making your packages too big right out of the box. But if you're giving them 10, I don't see any reason why they would need to see more than 25 images. But that's going to depend on what type of photographs it is. So, I need a little bit more information to help you really narrow that down. But be careful about looking elsewhere for an answer that works for somebody else. You have to find the answer that's going to work for you. But I promise you, if you do your research, too many does not make you more money. It simply doesn't, okay? Focus on the quality of your images, and then you'll make your money. That's the key. So did I see another super chat come up here? Edward, thank you so much, man, for the super chat. I sincerely appreciate it. Really, really do. And again, by the way, I know there's a lot of questions I haven't gotten to yet. I'm going to try to get to all of them. If you've got a question that you absolutely want to get answered tonight, use that super chat. It's a $ down in the bottom left-hand corner. If I have to stay here late, I will stay here late to answer all the super chats. And hey, just real quick too, if I can get a little bit of business out of the way, do me a favor, gang. Just take a second, hit that thumbs up under the video. It would be greatly appreciated. And of course, if you haven't subscribed, what the heck are you waiting for? Please subscribe to the channel. That way you'll get notified every time there's a new video. And social media, I'm most active on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I hope to see you there. I'm one of those people that actually does converse with people. I respond to comments. I answer messages. I have a Facebook group. You should check it out. It's called the I Shoot People Photographers Group. It's a very different kind of Facebook group. And of course, comments are always appreciated. Okay? All right. So that being said, let's get back here to our chat window. Pat McDonald, Surface Pro or an iPad or other laptop that is portable and light enough for travel that you can use to edit photos with Lightroom or Photoshop CC. Well, so obviously I'm a Mac guy. That being said, I'm not saying this because I'm a Mac guy, but there's been a lot of news lately that says these Surface Pros, who was it? Consumer Reports withdrew their recommendation and said these things are not that good. And this was, of course, after they were looking like, yeah. Everybody got all excited that this new iPad Pro can handle, Lightroom and that kind of stuff. Look, I'm sorry. For me, a laptop at a minimum. I hate processing images on a laptop. So doing it on an iPad, not happening. I prefer to be on a computer. So if it's a travel scenario and it's got to be small and lightweight, it's going to be a laptop. Definitely not going to be a tablet. Tablets just, they're not there yet. And I can't speak for the Microsoft because I realize Surface Pro basically runs, Windows 10. I've not used it, so I can't speak for that. But I will say the thing that really, really ticks me off about Apple and the iPads is that you can't do true multitasking. You can't easily do split screen. Those things, they boast about how powerful they are. If they would open them up a little to a few more features, they would be really practical. But of course they can't, because the minute they do that, people will stop buying their laptops. So, it's that double-edged sword. I get why they don't do it. I just don't like it. Okay. Castile, what do you think you can make a client edited variants of the same photos? No, definitely not. Okay. That's just you as a photographer, one, either being lazy, or two, lacking confidence. Don't do it. Okay. Because part of what you're encouraging to do is you're going to give the client 3 variations, and you will continue to do that until you come across the client that when they see the 3 variations says, ooh, that's kind of cool. Could we try a 4th variation with green? And could I see a 5th one, maybe with a little more yellow in it? Like, you do not want to go down that path. Trust me, okay? So, let's see. James Lewis, I purchased a lot of old manual lenses for real cheap. Do you have to go old school manual? Do you have a go-to old school manual? No, James, at this point, my eyes suck, man. So manual is a painful process for me. So I avoid manual stuff whenever I can. And that was actually one of the things I liked about the Sonys with the focus peaking, which the D850 does now have. But I don't have that much of a need to focus manually. So that's still not a reason for me to jump up to the, the D850. So, Catherine Cortez, you have a Canon Rebel 6 Ti. What speed light can you recommend for me at a reasonable price? Well, so you really got kind of a beginner camera there, Catherine. And if you are looking to just get your first light because you think you need a light. So that's the first question I would ask you is, why do you need a speed light? But if you actually need a speed light, I would look at maybe like a Yangwano, something like that. But I would question, based on the camera you have and based on the idea that I'm thinking you're a beginner, do you actually need a speed light? Or maybe would it make more sense for you to have a constant light source? And I actually have a video coming out about that this week, about the differences between constant light and strobe lights, as I'm going to lead into a whole series of videos about LED lighting. Okay. So let's see here. Thomas Palmer, it's a Kickstarter related to my photography. So of course I thought about a lot of options, but it's important to you. Consider I had the fear that you've got something in 2 days, by the way. Okay. Not sure what that's all about, Thomas. Sorry. And if it's something that's involving Kickstarter, do not give me the details, and definitely do not post the URL, please. Okay, thank you. So, John F., you're very welcome. I appreciate it. Anthony Thomas, I'm thinking of getting 2 PhotoFlex Rapidomes for an on-location project, group shots. I am allocated to a 16 by 16 footprint for my workspaces. Thoughts? 16 by 16 footprint, yeah, they would actually work out pretty good. It's basically like a 25-inch softbox. So just think of it that way. I mean, that's what you're dealing with. So depending on the location, you're saying an on-location project. Is this on location outside, or is this on location in an office building? Because honestly, if you're on location in an office building and you're going to do a larger group, I'd go with umbrellas. Go with shoot-through umbrellas. But if it's out on location, umbrellas are extremely inefficient unless you can put the umbrellas right on top of your subject. So then I would go ahead and definitely look at something like the Rapidome. I think that would possibly be a good solution as far as that goes. Okay. Nelson from Tanzania. Thank you, man. Awesome. Andrew, do you think that camera manufacturers overload us with choice, and will the cycle of multiple models every year ever end? Well, yeah, actually, I did mention that in the beginning. I don't know if you saw my whole thing, or maybe I just talked too much. But yes, I do. Listen, let's be fair. Camera manufacturers, equipment manufacturers, all of them, the companies that make modifiers, all this stuff, they got to make money. I mean, I get it. But yes, they absolutely overload us. And this fanboy culture that Sony developed and did really, really well. And I say that with respect. It's not like, ooh, okay? And somewhere out of nowhere, because let's face it, Nikon's been the kicking boy for a while now, they managed to get this groundswell of fanboy attitude over the D850. I mean, people are going bonkers. And the best part is 2.5 months ago, all the Nikon people were like, if they don't come out with a mirrorless camera, I'm leaving Nikon. I've had it. And Nikon comes out with the D850 and everybody's like, oh my God, like, wow, So, hey, good for them. But yes, a big part of what happens is we're getting this equipment so fast, so furious, it benefits the companies. It doesn't benefit the photographers. Okay, it just doesn't. So, Anthony Thomas, if you're indoors in a church, man, I go with umbrellas. And obviously, I love the Rapidomes, but the umbrellas are going to give you a little bit more coverage. It's going to make it a little bit more even. So, yeah, since I'm a Photoflex guy, I'd say buy the Photoflex through umbrellas. I love them, but at a minimum, I would say go with umbrellas. So, all right, let's scroll on up here. David, I've been shooting a lot of bikini fashion lately, and I want to market myself to companies that sell bikinis so I can photograph for them. How should you start doing that? Well, David, for the most part, you should understand that you're not going to make a dime because every photographer that shoots girls and chicks in bikinis wants to have their pictures used by the bikini manufacturers. So if you look at bikini manufacturers and their social media and their websites, you'll find that the overwhelming majority of them have people sending in pictures all the time. And that's part of their shtick. Photograph a model in it and we'll use your picture. We're not paying you. We're going to give you the benefit of saying that we used your picture. So yeah, you're barking up the wrong tree because David, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but let's take those words that you just put in there. Bikini fashion. What exactly is that? I don't think that that's a definition that we are going to see a modeling agency use. I don't think that that's a definition that really pretty much exists. It just means that you like doing pictures of chicks in bikinis, and maybe you do it with a fashion feel. Okay, but understand that, fashion and catalog are two very, very different things, all right? The bikini manufacturers don't need fashion pictures of their bikinis because fashion pictures are not meant to sell product. Fashion pictures are meant to sell attitude, concept, color, tone, style, elements. That's what a fashion picture sells. So the pictures that sell product, i.e. get people to buy the bikinis, those are catalog shots. They're simple, they're clean, but they're not fashion. There are two completely different worlds apart. But seriously, you're not going to make any money in that business. I wish you the best of luck, but the only way you're going to make any money is you're going to find a company that is probably local to you. And by the way, David, if you're not in Florida or LA, give up on the fashion bikini stuff, man, because there are tons of photographers in Florida and LA that shoot bikini fashion and do it quite well. And that's also where those companies happen to be located. So unless you are the most amazing thing since Swiss cheese to ever photograph a bikini, don't think that a company in LA is going to hire you like if you're in Dubuque. It ain't going to happen. Okay? So yeah, I'm sorry. I wish I could give you like a better, here's the plan. But I can't tell you how many times I've heard that question, and it's usually people that just love shooting girls in bikinis, so they want to try and make money at it because, hey, it'd be great if I can make money when I pick up my camera, but there's just no money doing that. It's like shooting modeling portfolios. There's no money in shooting modeling portfolios. I advise models all the time. You go to my website, modelingtip.com. It's a great resource for models. It's got directory listings for every modeling agency in the every legitimate modeling agency in the United States. Makeup artists, which is helpful to you guys, photographers. But I tell girls, don't pay a photographer to shoot your modeling portfolio. In today's marketplace, any girl would be stupid to pay a photographer to shoot her modeling portfolio. Just that simple. Okay? So, let's see here. Scrolling back up, or scrolling back down. Sorry. What do we got? Bill Anderson, interested to see your future videos in an 8200 as a friend works for a company that imports rebranded versions. And not only is it the biggest seller in their history, but the lowest ever customer returns. Bill, I don't doubt that. I completely understand how people can think that it is like the coolest thing since Swiss cheese. Understand that, I'm a photographer that's coming from a scenario where I've got decades of experience using kind of the more traditional lighting setups, which also means that I have tons of modifiers, tons of mounting brackets, tons of the gear that you used to put strobes together with modifiers. And this 8200 doesn't do squat with any of it. Unless I want to go out and jury rig a whole bunch of crazy adapters. Nobody's built an adapter for it yet, which is stupid on the part of Godox. They should have built an adapter right out of the box with an inset plate to go inside a speed ring so that it works efficiently. So they came out with this revolutionary strobe that's heavier than all get out. For why? I mean, these things are meant to be portable. They're not really designed as studio strobes. And they're not being marketed as studio strobes. So why would you make something so heavy that's meant to be portable? It just makes no sense. So as far as I'm concerned, it's more gimmick than not. And unfortunately, a big part of the problem is, if we look at the big picture, so many photographers that are buying this 8200 think it's cool because of the bare bulb thing, yet they don't really understand how to use a bare bulb. And indeed, I've seen it. I've seen it at meetups. I've seen it at workshops. They're throwing those 8200s into the back of a regular softbox with all the light flying out the back, or they're sticking that bare bulb into an umbrella and the light's just going everywhere. So, again, it's one of the things, people don't actually understand how to use it. So what they're doing is they're using it incredibly inefficiently. And I'll be damned if I'm going to buy a new light of any kind and then have to buy all new modifiers. That's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. So, for any company, as far as I'm concerned, if you're going to come out with a product that's revolutionary and so different that you have to buy that whole system and you can't use anything else, then, man, it better be, unheard of. Oh, my God, this has just changed my life. And the 8200's not doing that. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's a piece of junk, but, for somebody that's got gear and somebody that understands lighting, it's just poorly designed. It could have been designed much better, so easy, okay? My beefs with it are easily solved beefs that should have been solved before this thing was ever released to the public, period. That's where I'm at. So, Damon Hill, you were the first person to show me the potential for cell phone photography. No substitute. Thank you. I'm glad. I mean, honestly, if nothing else, it's fun. That's really what it is. It's fun. And besides, let's face it, it's not practical to pick up our DSLRs every day, or even for some people, multiple times a week. Okay? Jacques, with saying that models shouldn't pay for their portfolio shoots, what would be the advantage for the photographer? If, say, for example, the photographer is always established, like you, for example. I have models come in all the time that I don't pay and don't get paid for, and I'm shooting them for YouTube videos. That's my advantage. That's not going to be your advantage. Jacques, the reality of it is that most of these people that want to shoot models, if they haven't moved to New York and they're not really, really good fashion photographers, they just want to shoot pretty girls. And I don't mean that like it's a bad thing. I mean, hey, they like shooting pretty girls. So there's no money in that. We've got on one side of the fence tons of people with cameras that want to shoot pretty girls. And on the other side of the fence, we got tons of pretty girls that want to have their picture taken. Win-win. That doesn't mean it's a business model. In fact, that means there's no business model. It's just a bunch of people, collaborating, having fun, getting along, making art, all that good stuff. Nothing wrong with it. So, and to be fair, just so that I don't get misquoted, those models that choose not to pay a photographer, I also tell them, the other half of what I tell them is that they then own the responsibility of understanding what types of pictures need to go in the modeling portfolio, because most photographers do not understand that. But as long as they're willing to own that responsibility, there's no need to pay. They can find plenty of people that will do it. So April, I do shoot the models for marketing. All the beauty shots that you guys see me do, I rarely get paid for those. Those are just fun pictures. You don't see pictures like that in advertising. You don't see them on billboards. You don't, they're just art. That's it. They're for fun. I enjoy that process. Okay. That's it. So, LR Styles, glad you like the iPhone stuff. Thank you very much. Okay. Jacques, would it be seen as promotion for yourself with the agency? Not with an agency, because modeling agencies aren't going to pay you money for pictures either. It's promotion for myself with potential new clients. Back when I was doing modeling portfolios for a living, I made my money not just because of my photography, because there's thousands of other photographers that take great pictures of models. So it's not like I was doing anything that somebody else wasn't doing. I made my money because I understand the marketing concept behind models. I've been involved with the industry long enough, so I put together a lot of resources and I mentored models. So what I was able to sell to a model was, hey, if you come and shoot with me, and if you follow the guidelines that I give you and will personally tailor for you and your life situation in your location, if you do those things, I can guarantee that you will get signed by an agency and that you will make back the money that you invested. And I had a 100% success rate doing that. As long as the model went home and followed the guidelines I gave her, and sometimes did they not follow? Yes, sometimes they did not follow, and they failed. But as long as the model went home and took the steps that I recommended, they got signed. Done. So that was the business model that I built. Andrew Russell, what is the best method for learning about artificial lighting? Well, okay, so since I'm sitting here on YouTube, the first thing I have to say to you is my YouTube channel. Check it out. There's tons of videos about lighting. But actually, I would encourage you, by all means, watch some of the videos on my YouTube channel, but then watch the series that I've got starting this week. It's going to be a 4, maybe 5-part, but definitely a 4-part series that is about the difference between constant light and flashlights, strobes. I already have a set of videos up that are the difference between speed lights and studio strobes. But at the end of the day, Andrew, the best way to learn about artificial lighting is to pick up the camera and shoot in artificial lighting and screw stuff up and shoot some more and screw some more up and shoot some more and screw even more up and keep shooting. I swear to God, that's the best way. Okay? Don't become a photographer that is YouTube smart and practically dumb. Don't be that person. There's way too many of them out there today because people are spending so much time watching these videos, which I love that you watch my videos. But my videos only work if you go out and pick up the camera and try it. If you just watch it on YouTube, you get all this information shoved in here, and then you go pick up a camera and you can't make sense out of any of it. So you gotta go practice with it. Okay? All right. Let's scroll up here. I know I missed a couple. Natasha just bought the D500 II and the Tokina 100mm lens. Awesome. Good kit there. Okay. Bill Anderson, everyone I've seen using it uses a standard Godox to S adapter that's been around for years. Yeah, but the problem with that is it's open in the back. So you're throwing light all over the place. It's very, very inefficient. Very inefficient. And trust me, go on YouTube. Look around. There's a whole bunch of people showing up, now with DIY solutions to be able to keep the light in the box. So you're throwing the light forward. So, yeah, I mean, it's just, again, to be clear, it's a system that, as far as I'm concerned, had a tremendous amount of potential. That's why I bought it after hearing how much everybody loved it, because overwhelmingly everybody loves it. I've never been more disappointed, like literally. I don't think it's well thought out at all. So for a new photographer that doesn't have any, depth of experience, awesome. For geartographers that like gadgets, awesome. But for somebody that's been shooting like forever, has tons of modifiers, wants to be able to use gear interchangeably. I don't want to have one system for this piece of equipment, one system for this piece of equipment, and one system for this piece. That's just dumb. So you build it that way, the 8200 doesn't do the job at all. Okay. Let's see here. People's photography would improve if they ignored all the hype and shot more with what they already have. You're right, RJ. I do not disagree with that at all. So, Murdo Inc. I think that once you own the lenses that you need, you can change cameras every 3 years or so, specifically if it's an investment and not just a purchase. Well, you know, Murdo, I don't disagree, but I think that's a really bad way to look at it. I have to be honest with you. You can't say mandatorily you should just change every 3 years. Like, you know, if most camera shutters now are rated for like hundreds of thousands of actuations before they're supposed to die. So if you don't shoot that heavy and your camera's turning out good work, why are you going to change in 3 years? There's no reason to change. That's the point. You don't change just because there's been 2 new cameras came out in the meantime. Oh my God, my camera's 3 generations old. I suck. No, that's like no reason to buy a new camera. You buy a new camera when you need a new camera. The points that I outlined are points that help you establish legitimately if you really need a new camera, as opposed to, do you want the new camera? That's the challenge. So, John G, any thoughts on using light meters? I grew up old school. My first meter was analog. I still use a meter on occasion, digital, of course. Yeah, I use meters all the time, man. For video, I use them constantly and religiously. For stills, I frequently will use them. Full disclosure, you know, when you have a small studio space like mine and you shoot in that space routinely, you get to the point where you know, hey, if I set this flash at 1/4 power and it's in a medium softbox, I'm going to be shooting at f8. So, you know, when I'm doing setups that I do routinely, do I meter it? No. Frequently, I'll just know. If I know that's an f8 setup, I'm going to start at f8 and I'm going to chimp and I'm going to look at the back of, you know, my camera. But light meters, yes, absolutely. I highly recommend them. Now, that being said, let me flip that around though. I also can walk outside. I'm not as good inside as I used to be, but I can walk outside on any day. Sunny, cloudy, overcast, you name it, any time of the day, except for night. And you tell me an ISO, I'll tell you the proper shutter speed and aperture just by using my eyes. Because back in the day when I learned, the first thing that went bad on a camera was the light meter. So especially as a newspaper photographer, you had to learn to set your exposure by eye. Yeah, gang, that's actually possible. People do that, okay? And part of the way you did it is you learned to understand the guidelines that were printed on the inside of film boxes. It's the Sony at f16 rule. And you have to understand that there's a lot more to the Sony at f16 rule than f16. That's the point. But I also took that to the point where I could use that indoors. I could walk into a room, and in fact, I actually won an award for a news photo of 2 elderly people that had had several hundred dogs removed from their home by the SPCA and the state police. And I did a shot of the 2 of them. They had asked me not to, true story, they had asked me not to photograph them. I had a camera around my neck. I'm like, there's no way I'm leaving without getting a picture of this. So before you all get mad at me, I would not have run the picture without their permission, but I was determined to take the picture. Shoot first, ask questions later. That's the first rule of thumb for any photojournalist. So the camera's around my neck. I had a 24mm lens on it. There was a reporter in the room talking to them. The 2 of them were standing side by side, and I had my hands on the top of the camera. I had set my exposure, pre-focused my lens at the estimated distance, shooting at f2.8. with a 24mm. So I got a lot of depth of field from the lens, but still 2.8, hard to get things in focus. Had the correct distance set, had my camera on, or my hand on top of the camera, popped the shutter as I coughed. I did it twice. I got 2 frames. Went back to the newspaper, knew that I loved the picture, and indeed nailed the focus, I'm proud to say, on both shots. Nailed the exposure. So I printed one, took it to my editor and said, hey, here's the deal. They said don't photograph them, but there's no way I could pass on this. So he looked at me and he said, fine, go back and get their permission. So I did. I drove back, and the whole time I'm trying to figure out how am I going to convince them to let me use this picture, because they were adamant, do not photograph them. So I went and I knocked on the door, and the old woman answered. The man was wheelchair bound. The old woman answered the door, and I asked her if I could come in to chat with her and her husband for a minute. And they were still really upset because as much, and this house, oh my God, the smell, it was incredible. But these 2 people meant well. The whole situation they had just got way out of control, and they had all these dogs, and they couldn't keep up with them. They couldn't care for them. So they were upset. The woman let me into the house, and I took the photo out of an envelope, and I told her, I said, listen, I understand that you asked me not to take pictures. Now, keep in mind, the whole time I'm driving there, I was trying to figure out what's going to be my spin, right? So I showed them the picture. I handed them the picture, and I said, I'm being very honest with you. I took the picture because I really feel that your story is compelling. I would like to be able to share your story. And I think that it's so much more important that people see the two of you, to understand that you're good people, that you meant well. And this was just a situation that went wrong. And I talked to them for about 10 minutes, and finally they both looked at me and said, go right ahead, use the picture. Bingo. And I won a news award, a feature news award, from the Pennsylvania Press Photographers Association for that picture. But no light meter involved because I couldn't pick the camera up and put it to my eye. That would have been the giveaway. So I had to do everything with the camera hanging in front of me on my chest. So you can do it. It takes practice, practice, and practice. All right, let's get a couple more questions here. So RJ Bradbury, shutter actuation limits are just an estimate. That's right. And they can, anything can fail at any time. I have yet to have a Nikon camera, because I can only speak to Nikon. I didn't have my Sonys long enough. I have yet to have a Nikon camera fail at a number lower than what is estimated. It's yet to happen to me. So I have never in my entire career had a camera long enough that I've had to have the shutter replaced. But at the same time, I'm not one of those people that dumps a camera every time a new one comes out either. So, I mean, I usually have my cameras for several years and they get heavy use, okay? So, Tammy Gilly, still in the screw up and reshoot phase for portraits, but I've used information learning videos to help with landscape. It's awesome. Interestingly enough, landscape photography is not, photography is photography. The subjects change, which means that some of the nuances change, but photography is photography. Anthony Thomas, did you have old people sign a release? No, because it was a newspaper situation. We took them on their word. We're talking 1978, Anthony. Back then, the police welcomed photographers at news scenes. Why? Because the police did not have cameras and they didn't have dark rooms. So newspaper photographers and police got along really, really well because we would photograph the crime scenes. When I was a teenager and in my early 20s, I photographed autopsies. I photographed crime scenes, bodies, all that kind of stuff. And there was a simple, clear understanding that the newspaper would not publish photographs like that. So, back in the day, things were done with somebody's word and a handshake. And that was fine. Today, if I were to do something like that, oh, hell yes, I would get a release sign so that I had proof. Or I would make sure when I went back, I was recording the fact that they said yes. That's one of the nice things about video. But back then, no releases at all. Definitely not for news. So, let's see. Adam Issard, I walked by a barbershop the other day and saw some faded blue tint pictures in the window. Would taking pictures for the barber of his work be a good marketing for both of us? It could be. It depends on his clientele. So, yeah, I mean, if he's got, I would say an upscale clientele, then sure, there's a good chance that these people would use photos for social media, for business purposes, maybe LinkedIn. So you kind of got to look at it from the standpoint of where is the barber? What is the income level and the work, type of his clientele? And photographers do it all the time with women's hair salons, etc. Portrait photographers, wedding photographers. So that's certainly an option. Okay. So Andrew Russell, thank you, man, for the subscription. Really, really appreciate it. So Kevin, what do you think about exposure, white balance aids like the Expo disc, gray or color cards? Are they worth the money? Absolutely. Yes. Now, to be clear, because of custom white balance in Photoshop and in Lightroom, the little eyedropper tool, that stuff works really, really well. And if you're shooting RAW, in theory, you don't need to do those custom balances in camera. However, I'm a big fan of doing them in camera. My go-to item is the Expo disc. It's made by Expo Imaging, which are the same folks that make the Rogue flash benders. Great company, great gear. I've used the Expo disc for years, and I use it religiously in the studio and on location. Whenever I'm shooting models, portraits, that kind of stuff. I'm a big believer. You guys have heard me talk about the idea that when I shoot black and white, I change my picture style to black and white, so I'm seeing a black and white preview. And I explained that I did that, or I do that, because back in the day, when you would shoot black and white, you would light and expose one way, then a different way for color. So I like to be able to see the preview that shows me I've got good color happening. I want to see that with the lighting that I've chosen and the exposure that I've worked with, that the colors that are in the scene are interacting well, that they're balancing well. So when your color balance is off on your LCD, you're not getting a good representation of what's really happening in your scene. So is it, oh my God, you have to do it? No, you can do it in post. Absolutely. Even something as simple as, having the subject hold a grade card and then balancing in post for that whole set of pictures. It works. It absolutely works. But for me, I really like to see as much of it right in camera as I can, because there's more than just the white balance aspect of it. So, all right, David, good. I'm glad you're not going to make money with the bikini thing. So that being said, man, the easiest thing to do, two things, and it all depends on how intensely you want to do it. Step one, Google. Go and Google every bikini designer manufacturer in the United States. Now you have a list of companies. Most of them have websites. On their websites, frequently there is contact information. The bigger companies, the only contact information you're going to get is like customer service. Now, if you are intensely committed to doing it, it's going to cost you $500 for 1 year. It's a lot of money. But you can go out and you get a 1-year membership of a LinkedIn Premium. Once you have the membership with LinkedIn Premium, you can go and you can search on LinkedIn every one of those companies and easily find the marketing directors and contact them directly through LinkedIn. But it costs you $500 for the ability to do that for 1 year on LinkedIn. The free version of LinkedIn doesn't give you the ability to search that deep and find that kind of information. So again, it all depends on, just quite how important it is for you to be able to do that. And as I mentioned, if you're not in Florida or LA, good luck. It's going to be tough because most of those companies don't use studio shots. They photograph bikinis on a beach. That's what they want. Okay. So, Robert, more stories. I'm actually, Robert, I've had a lot of people asking me to do a video like about how I became a photographer and all that stuff. And I don't know. I'm trying not to be modest about it, but honestly, I didn't think it was that big a deal. But I've had a few people say you should do it. So I'm thinking of trying to put one together this fall. Just a little short piece. The reason why I'm waiting a little bit is so that I can make a visit down to Arlington Cemetery in Arlington, Virginia. My father, who passed away in 1988, that's where he is buried in the columbarium there. So in the very early days of my photography career, my father had a lot to do with my success, and not in the ways that you might traditionally think. So if I'm going to do that video, I need to go there to be able to record a piece of it, because that's a very key part of really how it all got started for me. So yes, I will do that. I will share some of the stories. I'm learning that people actually do, like hearing them. And as always, my goal is, if I share them, is going to be to try and do it in a way that I can teach people some lessons and kind of really help people. So thank you for asking. So, Adam Assart, you're welcome. Neutral density filter or variable neutral density filter, and why? I don't use the neutral density filters. I own them, and it's I have a variable. The reason I don't do them is I don't really care about the whole high speed sync and the overpowering the sun. But they're, in my opinion, the easiest way to do it, easier and better than using the high speed sync flashes. And indeed, that's how we did it back in the day before there was no such thing as high speed sync. So for me, I would say if you're going to do it, it costs more money for one filter, but go with the variable, because it's like having multiples. Otherwise, you need multiples of the neutral density filters to really be able to kind of cover all your needs for what you're shooting. So Alan Fong, it may have been asked before, but when does it matter which color space to shoot in? Again, the same type of thing, because you can play around a lot after the fact if you're shooting in RAW. But for me, I do most of my shooting in Adobe RGB, and I definitely don't want to get into a big in-depth discussion, since I'm way over time already, about color space, Alan. But there is a lot of really good resource information out there about color spaces. I will tell you this. The overwhelming majority, this is going to really get a lot of people going. So this is a great way to finish the night, okay? Because all of the tech-tographers, their heads are going to explode with this statement, all right? The overwhelming majority of the people that are here watching this feed right now don't need to shoot anything beyond sRGB ever, period. Now, right now, all the tech photographers their heads are like swelling, okay? Yeah, obviously you're going to go pro RGB if you've got to have every little piece of color and you want the full gamut, yada, yada, yada. I will tell you honestly, I shoot pretty much all of my stuff except, of course, video in Adobe RGB, and then I will convert to sRGB when I'm saving for the web. But there's a lot of great resource information out there. So, definitely check that out, and then I'll give you a little bit more in depth. Okay. All right, gang. So listen, I want to thank all of you. As usual, my ability to tell time pretty much sucks. I'm at 1 hour and 20 minutes. But seriously, I enjoyed the night spending the time with you guys and chatting. I really appreciate all of you being here. So again, guys, as it always comes down to it, get out there and use this information. Don't spend all your time on YouTube, on Facebook. Go take pictures. So I hope that I will see you later this week for my video series. It's going to be about the differences between constant light and strobes, and then it's going to lead into LEDs. If you're not a member of my Facebook group, check it out. The link is in the description below. I guarantee you will learn stuff in my Facebook group, and that means it's time. So please, gang, remember these words. Thanks for watching another live episode of TogChat. Now go pick up that camera and shoot something, because your best shot, it's your next shot. So keep learning, keep thinking, and keep shooting. Adios.